Welcome to Hanging with the Hoopers podcast, where we're joined by our special guest, VP at FNF and State Manager for Maryland, D.C. and Virginia, Joseph Shepard.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Hanging with the Hoopers podcast. Tim and Andrew Hooper, your hosts, where we believe the attitude of leadership is everything. It'll make a difference for your organization. We're excited because we get to have on with us today our friend, our colleague, and the man for the hour, Joe Shepard. And he's our leader, fearless leader. So Joe, welcome to the podcast, man. And just great getting to know you the last, 6 months now?
Yeah, it has been. It's crazy. June.
Crazy. Yeah. Andrew,
Kinda
where was the applause, Andrew? You tee up the applause on
I
the...
did it. I
Oh,
was
you
hoping
did?
to hear
Okay,
it. But
gotcha.
yeah, welcome. Joe, it's good to have you on, man. I mean, as Tim mentioned, we've worked with Joe for the last 6 months in our capacity in working with in the title real estate space. And Joe leads the entire Mid-Atlantic region for Fidelity National Financial and the agency operations side. And just an incredible leader, incredible guy to get to know. We wanted to have him on today and pick his brain. We got some cool stuff coming up. And we want to talk about that with Energize coming up in January. And then we also just want to get into some topics around leadership, because that's what this podcast is all about. And, you know, I know we've seen some cool things we want to dig into with you and just, you know, share some nuggets for the audience and folks who are in leadership roles on how they can be better leaders. So that's the idea for the day. But Joe, welcome, man. Thanks for joining us. So
absolutely.
To kick us off, Energize. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about Energize, like your vision for Energize and why we're doing this for our agents, our title agents and title attorneys across the Mid-Atlantic.
Yeah.
I mean, really, honestly, it kind of was born out of conversations the three of us had, that I wanted something moving into 2024, especially coming through 23, which was a year that was a bit of a shocker to a lot of people in the industry as compared to 22 or the first half of 22 and certainly 21. I just thought, we've reached a point in the market, in our relationship with our business partners, that we need to kind of get a shot in the arm. We need to think about doing things a little bit differently than we've done it in the past. Certainly the market has evolved and we need to evolve with it. Yeah. And the best way to do that is to get, everybody involved in a high energy, business forward type forum where there's an exchange of ideas. There is, kind of learning new stuff. Yeah. Because the quickest way to get stale is to do something the same way you did it yesterday, or the day before. So you've got to continually evolve. And I was looking for some way to do that. And you guys had, three of us put our heads together and Energize 24 was born.
Love it.
So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a tremendous opportunity for business owners, sales managers, anybody in an agency operation who wants to grow business and wants to evolve. Yeah. I think this will be a tremendous opportunity. Absolutely tremendous.
Yep. Joe, I love that you said evolve and evolution. It reminds me of Ryan Holiday's quote. He said, "We don't need a transformation. We don't need a revolution. What we need in business is evolution. Just small. Sometimes the smallest tweak." And you said it best, the sharing of ideas in a forum setting is you're going to be surrounded at Energize and for any sort of mastermind. I mean, you think about your business, you always want to be plugged into some form of learning, right? So Energize is in January. We want you all there, but always being plugged into something where you're learning or rubbing shoulders with growth-minded professionals. Yep. It's going to stretch you. It's going to make you think about that one little idea. And sometimes it's, Andrew, as you know, it's that small, tiniest little thing. And it might even be just an improvement on something you're already doing or a tweak. Yeah. So I love that you use the word, Joe, evolve. I mean, it's exactly what Energize is about. Getting that spark inside of your brain to happen. That then turns into a flame that then goes back to your office, your organization. And this isn't just for a charismatic salesperson. Energize is going to be very practical, very hands-on for anybody who's growing a book of business. Maybe you're a branch manager and you're just thinking about what is that differentiator in my local marketplace, specifically as a real estate attorney or a title company. What's that differentiator? What can I go do differently? And so
Exactly.
I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
Exactly. You don't have to be a what I call in your face salesperson or
Yep.
in the customer's face salesperson to really get a benefit out of this thing. All you need is a mindset that you want to grow. You want to do things a little bit differently than you did it yesterday. And I think this will be
Yeah.
fantastic for you.
I mean, we talk about some of the little tweaks, and Tim, you mentioned. So I think sometimes when we think about evolving our sales, especially sales leaders, because we're talking to these business owners and leaders of sales teams all the time, and I think sometimes there's an idea that you have to go make this massive shift and do all this stuff to create change in your organization. And as we coach, and we know, like sometimes it's the very simple things, like rearranging how you write a freaking email, right? Or
Exactly.
something as simple as that in sales that
Yeah.
can help you move a needle forward. And so we're going to bring a lot of these very simple strategies. And the other thing I love about Energize being local in the Mid-Atlantic for our business partners that we support directly across the DMV is a lot of time in our industries, the big conferences that go on around these topics, so, NS3, Alta One, et cetera, they're in various destinations. And I think a lot of times when we get agency ownership out to these conferences. But why I love that we're having it local is our business partners are able to plug their entire team, their entire business dev team into these conferences locally.
Yeah.
So everyone's getting that shot in the arm, because a lot of times when you go to a big conference and you come back with all these ideas as a leader, a lot gets lost in translation to your team
Right.
because they weren't there to experience it, right? So
It's a good
I know
point.
when we were planning this, that was kind of a big part of this, right? Is get your whole team involved.
Exactly. And not only that, but my experience with with big conferences is they're awesome. And you go to this thing and you listen to these wonderful keynote speakers, and you are so jazzed when you leave, but that quickly fades because there's very little follow up. You go to this conference, you get some ideas, you come back,
Yep.
and we all do this. We're all guilty of it. You kind of slide back into your same old rut,
Yep.
where again, as you were saying, Andrew, having this local, we're in a position as a company to then follow up with the attendees.
Yeah.
And continue to monitor their progress and help
Yep.
them in their journey.
Yep.
Which doesn't happen at a huge
Right.
national type conference.
Right.
So
Right.
I think
Unless someone's selling their book, or like, hey, pay a couple $100 to come into our monthly Zoom call we do, which we've all, some of us have tried those out. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think what you just said, Joe, is so cool. Like, we're bringing, after Energize, we're bringing local masterminds throughout the year for our agents, kind of being the accountability buddy, if you will. Tim and I like to use that word, like in sales sometimes, because some of the marketing sales stuff is more of it's a nice to in our heads. We don't think we have to do it. It's more of, if I can get to it, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And so having someone to hold your feet to the fire, like you said, this was something that will move your business forward, and we're here to help make sure you go execute on that.
Yeah.
In a loving way. Like, we're not going to be horrible about it. Like, do it today.
But
You know what I mean? But yeah, we want to move it. We want to help you move. I think sometimes we catch the fire with our business partners just as much as they do. And we understand how much these things can play a huge role in growing their business. And so we get very passionate. We want to help. And I think that's the beauty of our team, is just a passionate group of people that want to help move the ball forward. So,
we want to be our agent's partner in their growth journey.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
You told me 6 months ago, Joe, and this is one thing I'll say to anybody listening to this podcast. The reason why I'm so pumped about F&F putting on Energize and formulating this master conference in January, right? Energize, be there, but then also the masterminds afterwards and the execution of ideas. But why I love that, Joe, we sat down 6 months ago when we first started talking, and you told me, and we used your word. It's right on the website. Go look, www.fnfenergize.com. And what does it say? Sales culture reimagined. Because 6 months ago you said, Tim, I want to reimagine our sales culture. period.
Absolutely.
And for you as a leader to say that, and now we're doing a conference about it. Why? We're not saying, hey, here's all these cool speakers we're bringing in. By the way, we have some amazing speakers, some nationally sought after speakers, some amazing voices your people will love to follow. But not only are we just bringing them in so they can prescribe stuff that we know, we are practicing right now in the trenches, practicing what we're preaching. And that's the benefit. That's the benefit. And so, and then also being able to put the firepower behind, we're going to come and help you, because you can get energized, but then you have to go execute. And then after you execute, you need to evaluate, and we're going to help you do all three of those steps. So come out and get energized. So, but reimagining, like Joe, let's dig into that just for a second, because I think as a leader, you have to think about what is that is not yet. Like you have to have that vision. And because reimagining is trying to be aspirational or think through what does the market need in a year or two, and are we there or aren't we? So as a leader, as an agency owner listening in, like what does reimagining, like how could they reimagine, or what do they need to do? Do they need to go in a dark cave somewhere and close their eyes and reimagine? I mean, what, like, we're all so busy, so plugged in. What does reimagining look like for the leader the average leader out there?
Oh, gosh, that's kind of a tough question, and I think it really, in some respects, depends on the circumstances. But from I can tell you from my experience, when I decided I needed to reimagine, at the end of 22, we'd come through a pretty significant downturn, coming off of 21. We survived it, obviously, but my mindset at that time was, I need to, going back to an analogy that my kids' hockey coaches used to use, and this is, it sounds very cliche, but it's so true, is when you're out on the ice skating, don't just wait for the puck to come to you. You've got to go to where the puck's going to be. So I kind of had to thought, okay, I need to look at where's the market heading? What are our agents looking for that isn't being provided to them at the moment, or maybe is being provided by a competitor, but not in the best format, And then that got me thinking that, okay, then I kind of need, because the way we're marketing or were marketing at the time was essentially the same way we were doing it, for 10 years prior.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't work anymore. It's some aspects of it do. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like completely throwing the baby out with the bathwater,
right?
But I'm adding some new warm bathwater into that bath.
Amen.
We got
spoken like. You're singing coming from a family with a lot of kids, Joe. You're singing my language. I was always number 7 in the line, so it was cold. It was freezing cold by that time.
It was cold. Yeah, exactly. That rain had started to form on the tub. But no, just thinking about, okay, how am I going to do this just a little bit differently? How am I going to get my sales folks, to use a word we've been throwing around a lot, how am I going to get them re-energized about their job? And how am I going to get them looking at things just a little bit differently? So that was my idea of reimagining. Honestly, at the time, I don't profess to be the sharpest tool in the shed or the brightest light, bulb in the pack. But I look at my job as to go out and identify some of those folks that I think do have a different mindset and are being successful, and then say, hey, what would it look like if you were on our team? And if you were on our team, how could I enhance what you're doing? And then how can you enhance what I'm trying to accomplish? So for me as a leader, that was my idea of reimagining.
Yeah.
Realizing that there are people out there that are smarter than myself, and I need to go out and identify those folks and take advantage of that.
I think you say, I think just what when you say like smarter than yourself, I think it's more of just playing to strengths, right? So like you're looking at what I'm hearing there is you're looking at what your team is doing really well. Okay, we need to double down, right? That's the
Right.
we need to keep doing those things that we do well, the core things, but then adding the warm water of how do we infuse some new energy, some new ideas, some new thoughts into what we're doing and stay ahead of the puck. And I love that analogy. With the staying ahead of the puck,
Where's it going to
when
be?
I was getting my pilot's license, you got to be ahead of the plane. You can't be reactive. You have to be always,
Right.
miles ahead of where your plane is headed and knowing what steps are coming next. So if you don't, you're going to fail. And so I think you exemplify that a lot just in what I've seen in the time working together of keeping the vision alive of what's 5 months, 6 months down the road, because everything we do today, and Tim and I, we talk about this all the time, Tim, but what you're doing today is going to be your result 5 or 6 months down the road. And sometimes when you're not getting instant gratification with something, it's hard to keep doing it, especially when you're, dealing with stuff in the marketplace in a down market, et cetera, because there's lack of a result, right? So it can weigh on you as a leader of, man, we're not getting the exact result we want. Instead of just going like, Joe, tell us, how do you avoid going to just a quick fix and staying consistent? Because I think a lot of leaders struggle with this. They're looking for who's that quick hire that I can just get in for an easy win, especially with the title company. You could bring me some contracts now, but maybe it's not the right DNA for the team long term. Like, how do you prioritize a quick fix versus a long-term vision and knowing that what we're doing today is going to result 6 months down the road in positive?
I think anytime you're looking at growth, you need to play the long game. We can all do something that gets an immediate shot in the arm. But if that immediate shot in the arm doesn't match your company's culture, or your method of doing things, that shot in the arm is going to be pretty short-lived, because you're going to get overall disgruntled with that person, or that person is going to get a little disgruntled with you, and that relationship isn't going to last long. So I would much rather find folks that I think will jive with the culture we have already built, but enhance it. Looking to grow, but still the basic idea or how we look at growth and business and the world is basically the same. And then play the long game, because if you're really trying to grow and grow smartly, consistently, in a method that allows you to not get overwhelmed, because that's very easy to happen. Then you need to be in it for the long haul, and realize that when in business, when you're trying to do something, in my experience anyway, the best results come from, like, as opposed to trying to turn around a jet ski, which you can do on a dime. The best and most lasting results happen by turning around the aircraft carrier. Because those are sustainable, long-term things that will last.
I love that. And just like that analogy, until I know you're chomping, but so powerful. Like, some of us focus on this little thing in our business that just jet ski, right? Just flip it. But we never go back to those core, like, we didn't build for our core operating belief, which is, where did the jet ski come from? Right. Where did the airplanes come from? You could turn a fighter jet on a dime, right? I love that analogy. It's so powerful. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps right now because of that. And it's like, you got to focus on the right thing. So Tim, like, you've been sitting there quietly just absorbing, listening. You're a great listener. Like, what are you taking out of this? Because this is getting me excited, man. I'm ready to go run through a brick wall right now.
I want to, me too. I'm already re-energized. So, Andrew, are you putting the Energize link somewhere in the description or something of this podcast, by the way?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I know some of you are listening and itching right now to get registered. You're hearing this. Go get registered. It's right in the description. But what I'm hearing is, first and foremost, I just want to go back and say, Joe, as you were talking, I was thinking Jim Collins' Good to Great, and how he said, you have to get the right people on your bus, and then you have to get the right people in the right seats of the bus if you're gonna move your organization forward. And you talked about, and I think here's a leadership lesson if you're listening. I think some leaders start out by default having to prove themselves to their their organization as they're climbing or growing, or even an entrepreneur, proving yourself to your market. Maybe somebody who said you couldn't do it, you have that little bit of a chip on your shoulder. And I think everyone needs a little bit of a chip. But here's the thing, getting to a point of humility to be able to say, I don't need to know it all. I don't have to know it all, and I don't need to be the best at everything or act like I am. Because Andrew, you and I see this so much, right? And I see this because I look in the mirror every day too. Somebody who, we all have that ego inside of us, where it's easy to want to look like that, the person who's in the know. So one of the best things you can do is say, I don't know, but I'm going to go out. 2024, guys, think about it this way. If you're a leader, I'm going to go find somebody who does know and who knows it really good. And I'm going to see if I can partner with that person. But then even in that recruitment strategy, I liked your analogy, Joe, with the aircraft carrier. I think a lot of times, and I see this too, where somebody will call me, hey, I'm looking to get this person on board with me. Can you help me? Can you? And they're just, I got to have this person yesterday. And I'm like, tell me the last time you met with them. Oh, like 6 months at a conference, we bumped into each other. I'm like, okay, time out. Somebody once in sales said, sell slow to close fast. And I think it applies to recruiting. I think it applies to business change. Not too much too fast. Why don't you go have lunch with that person? Why don't you just schedule some time? And don't make it a hard sell. Make it more about, listen, I respect you in the industry. I see what you're up to and doing. I'd love to pick your brain over lunch. Because I think sometimes we think, if I could just get that all-star on the team, and let's get her or him yesterday. Just sell slow to close fast, recruit slow to really, somebody said you should date before you marry. Like, I think you should date long, especially make sure it's a good cultural fit, a good team player. Yes, somebody who's going to be a challenger person on the team, they're going to stretch, but they're also going to be a team player and not despise the team, your existing team that you have. They need to come in and value the team that you have. So this is all aircraft carrier movement. But the thing is, you're going to tee your fighter jets up a lot better if you're pointing in the right direction. So
Exactly.
so I
got to
do
be
like
going
the
into
analogy.
the wind, man, so they can take off. I'm telling you.
Try
taking off.
Yeah.
Try taking off with the wind.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. Again, back to a pilot analogy. If your ship's not pointing in the right direction and you're trying to grow, you're not taking off. You need to be going again. You need to be headed into the wind so you can get the lift, right? You got to be pointing the right way. I love that.
The second prong on that, though, I think too, is if you're a leader, like Joe's talking about, going out and finding that all-star, because you're saying, oh, listen, I'm humble enough to know I don't know it all. But here's, I think, the second miss is sometimes as leaders, we go out to that recruit that we're going after and we try to paint this picture that it's so perfect over here. You would be better off painting the picture that it's not perfect over here, and that's why I'm talking to you. Because if you'll do that, they'll catch that spirit of humility and the honesty. Yep. Yeah. So and Joe,
could not agree more. Absolutely could not agree more. When you're in a recruiting situation, you need to be brutally honest with the person you're talking to, and if there's something that your company or your office isn't doing right, be honest about it. And say that this is something that I don't like. This is an aspect that I don't like, that I want to change. And, can you help me do that?
Yeah.
It's the worst thing you can do, I think, is be all rainbows and unicorns, because everybody knows that's not the case.
Yeah.
We all have an underbelly that, sometimes isn't so pretty. So let's be honest about it.
Yeah, exactly. And being humble enough to say, I don't know it all, and also being humble enough and honest enough to say, I'm going to release myself from this pressure to paint this perfect picture, because it's not. I'm talking to you because I've seen some things. And I think together we could really bring out the best in each other. And I think that's the best posture to be in. Go into 2024. Now, if you're at Energize, house rule, no recruiting at Energize, but you are going to rub shoulders with some really good all-stars out there and make some great connections across our industry. But not necessarily planning to go here with the conversation, but I'm glad we did, because I think recruitment is a powerful strategy when you're thinking about those evolutions that you need to make as an organization. So I'm glad we went here. I don't know if we have enough time, Andrew, to jump into a little bit of, Joe, you mentioned it. We've been through a tough industry. And I think leading through the tough, there's definitely some ideas we could pick out of your brain. So Andrew, what do you think? We got a little bit of time
Yeah,
here.
we're good.
I would love to dig in.
Let's roll into that.
Yeah. So, I mean, tough times, Joe. I mean, first and foremost, there's different categorizations of tough, right? A pandemic. There's right now our industry is being hammered with cyber incidents all over. I mean, it's just, there's tough, right? There's team, they're very individualized, maybe something with one person going on, a death in a family, or very corporately, like we've just mentioned already, or just an industry, a deck of cards that was dealt to everybody that you can't change, right? We're not the Fed, we're not the economy, but so, that's all outside of our control. As a leader of all these people who are looking to you for that voice, that calm in the storm, like how do you navigate that? And then what are some of your core principles as far as how you lead and what you default to?
My biggest go-to or default is over communication. Now that's not saying, that's not distributing information that you shouldn't be, or things that corporately you kind of need to hold back on. But when I say that, what I mean is make sure that your staff, and this is true whether you're going through, you're in the heyday and things are going great, or you are in the middle of a crisis, whether that be economic or, a cyber attack or whatever the case might be. Make sure your staff and your employees, from your key managers clear down to the receptionist, knows what's going on. Make sure you are sending daily update emails, or you're calling a staff meeting every so often and just saying, hey, since our last meeting, here's what's going on. In my experience, I have found that once folks know that you are being open and honest with them, and you're not painting false pictures, if it's ugly, you're being honest and saying it's ugly. We are not having a good quarter, or whatever the case might be. Employees tend to be a lot more understanding, and B, a lot more loyal.
Yeah.
Because they realize what's going on, that they realize they're part of a team, and they're not being excluded or feeling like they're not getting the full picture.
Yeah.
And then when the time comes and you have to make tough decisions as a manager, you tend to get a lot more buy-in from your staff and a lot more understanding that, we might not like this, but for the benefit of everybody, we need to do it.
Yeah.
That is my core go-to is just making sure that, everybody knows the deal.
Yeah.
At all times.
Yeah. One of the things I was really impressed about right away joining and working with the entire team was the consistency of the communication, the consistency of the managers' meetings, the consistency of the all-up staff meetings, and just the clear communication on a month-to-month basis of not only numbers, but, agency issues around the region and things like these are things that we sometimes, Tim and I were out there, we beat ourselves. Like, we don't beat ourselves, but we're like, our minds are like beat up. Like, why don't you do this in your organization? Because it's so powerful when you do, when you have a consistency of a meeting, when you have a consistency where you have an agenda and you're going through very specific things and the team knows what to expect. And even the best team members out there can have like, if you're not communicating and they know the market's bad, they know it's doom and gloom, they know the numbers are down and you're not communicating, even they have doubt in their mind. Like, they're walking in on eggshells. Like, am I going to get let go? Am I going to, like, your best team members are going to have that anxiety kind of come up inside of them if you're not communicating. So, and I speak from experience in my past of not having communication. You don't know am I next? Like, you even though you're crushing it. So at the end of the day, like, communication is key. But then also, Joe, I think one other thing, and I'd love you to go here. Like, I feel like Tim and I talk about people before profit a lot. And I do feel like you exemplify that. Like, you definitely care about the bottom line and running a profitable business, but I don't feel that I've ever seen you put that in front of a relationship of somebody on your team. So I'd love just to, if that's kind of Pandora's box there, but in our last 5 minutes, I'd love for you just to kind of explore that idea in your head. How do you think about that dynamic of kind of people before profit?
Real quick, can I go into one thing that is on topic before we get to the topic of people before profit? I will also say, Joe, something I recognized early on, and two things I recognized early on that I think every leader could take some notes right here. So we came into the first staff meeting, which happened, consistently every month. We came into the first staff meeting, and number one, I noticed you had a virtual option because some people were home or out or this or that. You had a virtual option. So number one, you were pulling in some of the people who couldn't make it so that they could hear and listen. And so the communication there, again, had evolved, right? And I know the pandemic forced some of that too. But you've kept that going. Yeah. You're right. You've kept that going. So that's an evolution I think everybody needs to make. If you're doing an all-out meeting, make sure you have a virtual option. Just make sure that those outliers feel like they are included or can be included, number one. But number two, and this might be the more significant note, I noticed how little you talked in the staff meeting. Now, you kicked it off, you had things to say, and you definitely took ownership of certain agenda items. But I noticed some of the leaders around the room, some of the salespeople had been tasked with leading a certain part of the agenda. And that impressed me because for that to happen as a leader, that meant communication is going on behind the scenes with key people who are bringing key metrics to a meeting and actually talking about, which I felt by doing that, the engagement was much higher. And I think as a leader, be careful that you're not the only one communicating because your people can become tone deaf very quickly. Right. And so that, Joe, I'm just going to, again, shout out to you. I've already told you this personally, but that's what I noticed. And I think as being a communicator, as a leader, means you're helping to get your team communicating. You're not the only one talking in, because sometimes leaders are talking in a wind tunnel or in a what do they call echo chamber?
Right. Yeah. In my opinion, a staff meeting should never be like a college lecture. It should not be the professor just, talking about quantum physics or whatever the hell it is. It needs to be a back and forth. And my job is to get the conversation started, but then to go back and lean on those people who we talked about a little bit earlier, who I think the analogy was that they're smarter than I am. But again, it goes back to you're relying on your people who have an expertise to then bring that to the table. And discuss what it is that they've been tasked with that they're really good at, and how that's benefiting what's going on for the company.
So good. So Andrew, back to your question.
So the
over profit.
The people over profits. I guess in my mind, I'm not purposely thinking putting people over profits. We all work for a large publicly traded company. Maximizing our profits that's our goal. But we've got to do that in a context that is moral and ethical and uplifts the people that are helping us make those profits. And I've always been a big advocate that while we are together as a group for the largest chunk of our day, therefore we have to like what we do and we have to like the people we do it with, or we're going to be miserable. But then when the day's over, then it is time to go home and focus on those other people in your life, whether it be your spouse, your family, your kids, your parents, whomever, who also uplift you and keep you mentally healthy and just the folks that you live with, and we all have a life outside of work, and it is our job to go live it, and if that means sometimes we have to segment things a little bit, okay, then we do it. But I think any good leader realizes that his or her staff have a life outside the office and occasionally have to live it. And sometimes that is wonderful and it's a great thing. And sometimes it's It's a very rough thing,
Yeah.
and you've got to give your staff the leeway to deal with those rough times and get through
Yeah.
those rough times, because then they will come back that much better.
Yeah.
So being empathetic, and I think you in the long run, if you are that way, and it's not being abused, and your empathy is not being abused, you got to be careful there too. But if you are being empathetic in the long run, that, in my opinion, that will maximize your profits, because your people will be happier, and therefore they will work harder.
Yeah. Again,
I love that.
Fighter
Strong.
jet versus aircraft carrier. Again, profits matter. They absolutely do. We can't be in business if we're not profitable. But if the empathetic leader will look at it and say, okay, I can maximize profits this month by, harping on everybody, beating on everybody, this, that, and the other, or I can maximize profits over the long term, like compounded in a greater way. If I look at more of how do I set my team up for better success. And again, those are sometimes the longer plays, the harder choices, the investments in the right things, like we talked about earlier, recruiting and whatnot, evolutions. So I love that where you went there, being that empathetic, realizing, and you kind of summed it up in this sentence, realizing your people have a life outside of work. I think a lot of business leaders miss that.
They do. It's the mind versus the heart, right? The mind is the numbers, it's the logic. The heart is the empathy and understanding, and I think you have to have a blend of the two.
I mean,
so I love how you articulate
I like nothing more than seeing our numbers go up. That's pretty exciting to me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people do, but then they forget about the human component. And when you forget about the human, I think it's a spiral. But I mean, this has been such a powerful 45 minutes or so that we've been on. And Joe, thank you again for joining and doing a great job with
this
the team.
Has been a blast.
Yeah,
I'd love to do it again.
Yeah.
Yes. You'll be a many-time caller. We'll do that. We'll do it for sure.
Yeah. I appreciate your mentorship, Joe. I've learned a lot of leadership lessons from you just in the short time. I look forward to many, many more years together. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in person. There's so many virtual things these days. In person, rubbing shoulders with you, 9 a.m., be out for a great breakfast. Networking, 10 a.m. Chelsea Pete's kicks us off. Then we go to a panel you don't want to miss. Then David Bravo Jr. Then lunch, David Bravo, another panel, Sam Trimble, and then F&F leadership like Joe gets to get up and thank you for being our agent. And then a happy hour afterwards. You can't get any better than that. All packed in one day for you, make it convenient, and 2 locations, Columbia and Richmond. So pick yours, be there, be in the room the 17th and 18th of January. Joe, thanks for being on today.
Oh, absolutely, guys. Happy to.
All right. We'll see you on the next episode of Hang with the Hoopers. Take care, everybody.
Take care, y'all.
All right, y'all take care.